Morning, everybody. Yet another pre-golf course video because for some reason it's 50 degrees in Pennsylvania in mid-December. But if you ask, all the Trumpites in this open-air prison that I'm an inmate of, global warming's not real. And even if it is real, what does it matter? We'll be dead. And, the world was made for the baby boomers. But, we're just going to briefly mention them because the baby boomers are the officers of the Good Old Boys Club, and they rule everything and thus make the rules we are all subjected to in the double standard. So, I'm under their iron fist rule at the moment. But I wanted to talk about another INFJ topic today, and it's something most INFJs have probably been slandered as, and you see examples of it if you look at famous historical INFJs and also famous fictional character INFJs. It's something very common we all deal with and we're slandered as, mostly due to the fact that INFJs, by our very nature, challenge the status quo. Being idealists, we want, to change the world for the better, and we hate double standards and exploitation and abuse, and we want to end that and have a system of justice that actually works to punish those that do abuse others, regardless of who they are, how many years on the job they have, who they're related to. Basically, the hell with the old boys club and treat everybody equal. Well, because of that, and this is, female INFJs, they really go after for this. Male INFJs, they try to get us to sell out first, and we usually don't. But because we challenge the status quo and we don't want to be in the club, we want to burn it down, we're seen as a threat. And the easiest way for them to deal with us is to discredit us by, of course, questioning our mental health. And usually, in a lot of cases, the attack that they'll use is, you're delusional. Okay, so as INFJs, we have a capacity to see the world in its most ideal form, and this has a dark side to it because people think, this is driving delusions and wishful thinking that the INFJ lives in a world of ideas, a world that they want to become true, things that they want to happen that can never come to fruition. And while there can be some elements in truth of that, that in itself is not true. I actually, when thinking about this video, I looked up in the DSM-5 what a delusion is, and a delusion is a fixed belief that is, amenable to change, to facts. So a delusion would be a fixed belief that, despite having incontrovertible evidence to the contrary, the person believing it, their belief will not change. Like for example, if a good example of a delusion would be if somebody who still believes, with all the facts we know now, that George W. Bush really won the 2000 election, and that the recount being stopped by Chief Justice William Rehnquist, who was made Chief Justice by Bush's father, that by the Supreme Court stopping the recount, didn't make him president, even though the reason Bush became president is because the Supreme Court stopped the recount, and not to mention all the behind-scenes shenanigans in the state of Florida in 2000, whose governor was, at the time, George Bush's brother, please clap, Jeb. So with what we know now, we know that had things gone by the book and the GOP Old Boys Club not intervening, Al Gore would have became president for better or worse. That's not the point. The point is that delusions are, per the DSM, a fixed belief that are unchangeable despite incontrovertible evidence to the contrary. So why are INFJs also slandered as delusional? Well, most people that are calling us delusional are trying to discredit us for a reason, because we're either A, challenging a corrupt system that they benefit from, and they can't have that, or B, it's some form of coercive control or narcissistic abuse that they're trying to put particularly on us because they want to control us for, it could be various reasons. We could be their narcissistic scapegoat. You could be in an abusive relationship. In other words, the person slandering you as delusional knows that what they're accusing you of being delusional is in fact possible, but they don't want you to obtain it because they want you to stay down where you are and, be a good little, submissive foot soldier or stay at home wife or, you know, landscape toady who does what basically do what you're told. Now, as I said, INFJs were idealists, and our idealism and our intuition and what we see as potentially possible is also slandered as delusional, and that's not simply the case. The way INFJ intuition works for me when discussing possibilities, I'll try to illustrate a picture the best I can. So if you all remember back in the 2000s, really popular show that I liked was House, the medical drama. A lot of times that show would deal with rare medical conditions, and they would often be in an office, the four doctors, discussing a differential diagnosis where they discussed about a half dozen different possibilities and would then test their hypothesis as to what one of those possibilities could be. And to me, that's how an INFJ mind works with possibilities. We think of what's possible. Now, saying something is possible is not saying that it's true. It's saying it could be true. And possibilities in themselves can be improbable. Like the greatest example of that would be if you were to say, if you play the lottery, you could say, well, I could win the lottery. That is indeed possible. It is highly improbable, but if you buy a lottery ticket, you have some chance of winning. It's not, delusional. You're not asserting that you're definitely going to win. You're saying that it is a possibility, however small. And that is something that, the average person would call an INFJ delusional to. You simply holding on to some hope that what you want to be could be, even if improbable, but technically possible. And there are other ways INFJs are slandered as delusional. We have our unique way of speaking, and I've mentioned a bunch of times, and you've seen me do it on camera, that sometimes what's in my head doesn't make it out the way I hoped it would. And that's frustrating for perfectionism. But a lot of times when we illustrate points, we'll do it in a way we think most people understand, and we're pretty esoteric and poetic people, and I know this from my own experience. So a lot of times I'll illustrate a point through things like metaphor, through satire, using my dark humor, using analogies, things like that, and those will get slandered as delusional. The examples, in those literary devices aren't what I'm saying is actually true. I'm using them to illustrate a point, and in some cases use references from pop culture that most people would understand, so they would actually get the point that I'm trying to get across. That in itself is not delusion. So ideas are not just curious, but they can also be dangerous. INFJs, we live in a world that can sometimes be subjective and completely removed from objective data, and that can be a good thing when the objective data is corrupted and coming from people who want to see you fail, because our greatest enemy at times can be our own bias and our own self-doubt. Now, this is because, these people that are slandering you as delusional for holding on hope to a possibility, they want you to not only think that what you think that is possible is delusional, they want you to give up all hope. They want you to simply fall in line and do whatever they're telling you to do, which is most likely coming, from a place of malicious intent, either to subject you to a menial servitude life, to get you to fall in line, be a person you're not, to exploit you for their own sick enjoyment or profit, things of that nature. So understand, if you're being called delusional, use your intuition to think of why this person is calling you that. What motivation do they have to have you labeled as, quote, delusional? Because usually, they're not trying to help you. They're not thinking, oh, he's going off the deep end, because INFJs, we're very driven people. We're not the most ambitious in terms of money, 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 stuff, stuff, stuff. But in terms of achieving our goals, we can do just about anything if the goal is a part of our drive to fulfill our purpose in life. So along the way, there's going to be people who label you as delusional for malicious reasons. They're doing it to get you to stop questioning a broken, corrupt status quo that abuses people that they probably benefit from. They may also see the improbable possibility that they're slandering as delusion as more possible than you think it is, because we're our own worst enemies and we're often hard on ourselves. Another little bit of advice, INFJ: if you think something's possible for you to do, it probably is, because you're going to be the last person who thinks it's possible. How many times have you said you don't deserve anything, you're not good enough, and all that? We're our own worst critics. We're not ENTPs here, think they're the greatest thing, in the world, and everything they touch turns to gold. So just remember, a possibility is not a delusion. A possibility, even an improbable one, is still possible. We play the long game. If it's something that's important to you, keep going step by step. Don't listen to anybody who is trying to slander you as delusional. Trust your own intuition on the subject. Your intuition's usually right. It's not always right, but it's your best bet. And remember, trust your intuition always, and don't sell out your integrity to make a deal with some old boys club that's going to stab you in the back anyway.